Thanks, Paul. Good morning, everyone. I hope you're doing well. Hi. So this morning, we are starting our series on courageous conversations, and we're going to be going through a lot of apologetic kind of topics. And I'm very excited about this because I must admit that I really love apologetics. Apologetics is, so I've titled this morning's sermon, it's kind of a clickbait title, right? Politically incorrect salvation. I hope it gets a lot of people's attention. And we're going to be going through a lot of reasoning and logical foundations for the Christian faith, and that's what apologetics is. It's using scripture as well as philosophy, as well as just the beautiful brains that God has given us to give a defense of our faith or of any moral or any kind of belief system. So I really, really enjoy it. But last week, Paul said, he gave a little bit of a criticism on the young adults, saying that they're only interested in understanding people's feelings. And the young adults did such a great job of saying, no, they also want to share their faith. It's not just about understanding people's feelings, but also sharing the faith. And I think that those two things kind of go hand in hand. So this morning, I would like to do things kind of differently. I would like to give you some underlying questions behind today's topic. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you the underlying question and the response. And then once I'm done with the response, I'm going to ask you to tell me what kind of emotions probably led to that person having that question. So if you're in a conversation with someone, like we're saying, we want to do courageous conversations, apologetics isn't giving you some bullets in your gun to kind of shoot people down and be like, I know more than you, you're a little bit stupid. That's not what apologetics is. It's for the believers. So we want to give you some defense for your faith so that you can enter into a loving, compassionate conversation with someone without fear that they're going to say something that offends you or makes you question your faith or gives you any doubt. You will be fortified, you'll be strengthened to go and have loving conversations. But to have those loving conversations, it requires you to go into a conversation with the intention of understanding the other person. Okay, so say now you're in a relationship with someone at work, a work colleague is your friend, and it comes up that you're a Christian, or it comes up that you were praying about something or even praying for them, and they say, how can you believe in God who allows bad things to happen to good people? Okay, that's not today's topic, but say now that's what they said. Now you can take some of the bullets that we've given you during this series, and you can shoot them down and give such great defense and have a much better argument than they, but you may have missed the heart behind their question. Maybe it's that they went through something hurtful in their past and they feel like God wasn't there for them. So you now have a great argument, but you haven't won the person over. When I first got into apologetics, Daniel Robinson was my life group leader at the time, and he said something I'll never forget. He said, you'll never argue someone into the kingdom. So the Holy Spirit has to be at work in them. You have to be praying for them, but you also have to be shining the light of God, showing them love. You're never going to argue them into the kingdom. So I'm going to, at the end of each question, ask for you to tell me, what do you think the emotions were behind them asking that question? And what do you think a compassionate answer could be to them? So I'll just ask one or two people each time. Okay. So today's topic is it intolerant and unloving to claim that Christianity is the only way to God? And there are 5 questions, I believe, that can be behind this question. The first is, does the Bible even teach Christian particularism? Christian particularism being that Christianity in particular is true and nothing else. How can you be exclusive in today's global village or in today's new world? Wouldn't the world be better off without religion? Aren't all religions different approaches to the same God? And if God is all loving and all powerful, wouldn't he have everyone hear the good news? So I'm going to go through each of them, and then as I do, I want you to think about, why would someone be thinking this question? Why would they have come to this conclusion? And what can we say in response to them? So today I'm not going to be giving a defense for the existence of God, and I'm not going to be giving a defense for for Christianity in particular. And I'm also not going to be talking about why would God send people to hell, those who aren't Christians. Those are topics that we could cover in future sermons, but we're going to just be talking about these few things. So the first one, does the Bible even teach Christian particularism? And this is very popular in today's relativistic world where everyone wants to kind of believe that all faiths lead to the same thing. We're all climbing the same mountain and reaching the same God, so we're all on the same page. And just by the way, if you're watching online or if you're even here in person, if you go to the YouVersion app, you can find a link to today's events in the description of this video. Or if you go to the YouVersion app and you go under events, you can search politically incorrect salvation, new creation, and you'll find all the notes. So I'm not going to go through everything today, but a lot of it is in my notes, so you can find some extra stuff in the notes. So, does the Bible even teach that Christianity is the only way? The short answer is yes. John 14, verse 6, Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. And even more than that, he says in Matthew 17, he says, wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and there are many that enter through it. But small is the gate and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it. So it seems as if Jesus believes that he is the only way to the Father and the only way to salvation. But more than that, it seems that Jesus believes there's not going to be a lot of people that find that route, which is what people are afraid of when it comes to Christianity. How can you be a Christian when there are so many people being lost? Well, it seems like Jesus believed the same thing. This leaves very little room for a Bible-believing Christian to think that all faiths lead to the same God. Christianity is taught by the Bible, and there are a lot more verses in the notes. So, I want to ask you, what do you think the emotion was behind this question? Why would someone be saying, does the Bible even teach Christian particularism? You can answer online. I've got the chat up here as well. If you're watching on live.newcreation, I've got live.newcreation open. You can send a answer. So what do you think? Why would someone say, does the Bible even teach that Christianity is the only way? I want this to be interactive because that's how you're going to remember it. I don't want you to switch your brains off and just listen to me. I want you to have your brains on. Is it taking a while to get started? Do you guys need some help? So maybe this person believes in the Bible, but culture has just affected them. Maybe it's that. Maybe they're a Bible-believing person, but culture has had a bigger influence on them, so they're trying to read the Bible through modern-day culture. It could be, right? Anyone else? Still getting your brains going? Say again? It feels unfair. It feels unfair. Absolutely. They might feel like Christianity is unfair to claim that it's the only way. And what could be a compassionate response to this person? If you have a friend that says, does the Bible even teach it? What could you say to respond to them? It's nice having been asked to think in church, eh? I think this one's the easiest because they seem to believe in the Bible. And I think a great response is to show in the Bible how God is a God of love. And you can use the Bible to go through it with them. All right. So now you see how it works. I want you to start thinking from the beginning. Next one is, how can you be exclusive in today's global village? Start thinking already. What kind of emotion was this person feeling to come to this answer? How can you be exclusive in today's global village? So this kind of saying is like, yeah, sure, in the past, Christianity was exclusive because it's all that the world knew. But now we're so connected all around the world. You see so many people that aren't Christian. How can you still be so exclusive? Christianity needs to keep up with the times. Okay? But that's not exactly true because the early church burst into a world in which saying that belief in Jesus is the only way to the Father was not an acceptable thing to believe in. And so they were persecuted heavily. Not only that, but Christianity then miraculously took over the whole world. and the whole known world became Christian. There were some Jews left behind, and then Islam started growing. But overall, Christianity took over the whole world. And then the Enlightenment happened, and they started exploring the rest of the globe and discovered that actually not everyone around the globe was Christian. And suddenly Christianity seemed cruel and arrogant to claim that it was the only way to the Father. And so they had to do the exact same thing that we're doing, or we're defending today, and that's defending that Christianity isn't arrogant or immoral to claim that only belief in Jesus is the way to the Father. And I'll tell you why. This argument is what's known as an ad hominem argument. The ad hominem argument is the claim that you are wrong based on your character. Because of your character, you are wrong. Whereas the character of a person and the truth of their claim have nothing to do with each other, right? And that's difficult to understand in today's cancel culture. We like to think that if someone does something wrong, everything in their past doesn't count. But I mean, if you go back to the 80s, 90s and watch Bill Cosby's comedy, he had some really funny stuff. He had some really funny jokes. If I listen to it, I still struggle not to laugh. It's really funny. He then had some terrible character flaws, but his character and the fact that his comedy is funny are not connected, right? Every Christian in the world could be arrogant and could be immoral, and that would have nothing to do with their claim to truth. Whether it is true or false, what they're saying has nothing to do with their character, right? But how can you claim a Christian is arrogant and immoral if they've searched for the truth of religion and come to believe that the gift of grace from God is sincerely true, and they humbly accept that gift, that free, undeserved gift? How is that an arrogant, immoral stance to take? Not only that, but if I were to turn the question around and say, if holding to a belief that others disagree with means that we are arrogant and immoral, aren't you being arrogant and immoral by claiming something that not a lot of people believe in? You're acting out the very same thing that you're accusing the Christian of being, right? And so, what do you think the person is feeling when they say, how can you be exclusive in today's world? What could be an emotion that led to this question? Maybe they feel left out. Maybe they feel, I think that's totally true. Maybe they feel like they want to be justified in their belief. That's not Christianity. Anyone else? Christianity is not keeping with the times. So it seems like a very outdated religion, maybe. So what could be a compassionate response? What could be an answer filled with compassion? If someone in your family or in your work were to come to you and say, how can you be so exclusive in today's world and believe that yours is the only way to God? I'm still watching online for comments on live.newcreation as well. I see you guys are as passive as everyone here. Anyone? Compassionate response? What's good we're doing this series if the response is difficult to come up with, right? I had written down here, another reason that maybe they're wondering that is they have a genuine desire for unity in the world, right? Maybe they have a genuine desire to see everyone on the same page. And so everyone needs to believe the same thing and have the same worldview for there to be unity. But maybe you could respond with compassion, talking about God's heart for the whole world to be saved. That God has the same heart for unity in the world. All right, going to the next one. Wouldn't the world be better off without religion? Who's come across this? Let's get some response. Eh? Yeah, it's just a yes, no. Who's come across this? Hey, you've come across this one, right? We've all heard the song by John Lennon. In fact, it's been used at the opening ceremony of the Olympics for the last 3 Olympic Games, where it says, imagine there's no heaven, it's easy if you try, no hell below us, above us only sky. Imagine there's no countries, it isn't hard to do, nothing to kill or die for, and no religion too. The implication being that if there weren't any religion, there would be peace in the world. There's a little help if you're looking for the reason behind people's thinking when I come to the question part. Okay, so This kind of thinking around the world has had three approaches to it. So people who say that, the world would be better off without religion, they've approached it in three different ways. The first is to end religion. But ending religion historically hasn't worked out so well, has it? If we look at the 20th century's communist China, Soviet Russia, and even in a different way, Nazi Germany, trying to end religion has turned out to be way more intolerant, oppressive, and violent than any religion has been accused of being, right? Another way of trying to deal with the world would be better off without religion is trying to condemn religion and trying to say you are wrong for believing in what you believe in. However, I want to just help you out here. What this person is doing is called a logical fallacy. So, they are saying you are wrong because you're being exclusive, okay? But by saying you are wrong, they are being exclusive, right? And therefore, by their own logic, they are therefore wrong. So they defeat themselves with their own kind of belief. Do you see how that works? So condemning religion hasn't worked either. And so the most successful approach to this has been trying to ask people to keep their religion private. So failing getting rid of religion, failing of condemning it, people have been saying, you must keep your religion private. But I don't know if you spot the pattern in logical fallacies here, but this person's worldview says you must keep worldviews private. And yet they go around making their worldview public, that you must keep your worldview private. They are evangelizing their religion, because religion is a set of beliefs concerning the cause, the nature, and the purpose of the universe. They are religious even if they're atheist. And they're evangelizing their own religion by telling you to keep your religion private, right? That you can't evangelize your own religion. Not only this, but it is almost impossible to ask someone to keep their worldview out of the picture. Your religion, your worldview, your belief in God is going to affect everything that you do. It's going to affect all your relationships. It's going to affect how you behave at work. It's going to affect everything you do in your family. For example, if you were to think of a lawyer dealing with a divorce law, and they have to vote on the divorce law, how they vote is going to change depending on what they believe the point of marriage is. If they believe that marriage is for the satisfaction and fulfillment and happiness of one single person, a very individualistic take on life, they're going to vote differently to if you as a Christian come along believing that marriage should be a representation of a covenantal relationship and a demonstration of commitment. You're going to vote differently. You cannot, and they're finding out all over the world that you cannot ask someone to leave their religion at the door. And I just want to point out, if you look in the notes as well, I want to point out religion and religious fanatics can be dangerous. But as a Christian, if you were to get closer to the character of Christ, it would be an attractive thing. Go and look at the early church and you'll see, I have a verse there from Acts 2, verse 46 and 47 that explains how attractive the early church was. So, why do you think someone would say the world would be better off without religion? They feel threatened. Okay. Yeah. I can see that. Anyone else?
So maybe they've been hurt by religion or their family's been hurt by religion.
Religion seems to have divided their family. And so the world would just be better off without religion. Yeah?
Most religious people are hypocritical. And so they point out the fallacies.
Christians are hypocritical, or adherents of other beliefs are hypocritical. So all religion is wrong. Yeah? They feel like you're taking away their free will by adhering to religions. Very cool. Okay, so I wrote that it's also from the same desire, like John Lennon was saying. They want peace in the world, and they believe that religion is the biggest stumbling block to peace in the world. What could be a compassionate response to someone who says this? Jesus is love, right? So this could be a similar response to the other question, and show how Christianity actually has a genuine desire for peace in the world too, isn't it? All right, now we go on to my two favorite ones. Aren't all religions different approaches to the same God? Aren't all religions different approaches to the same God? Isn't everyone just kind of following the same thing? If you're looking in the notes on the YouVersion Bible, you'll see I have a little elephant analogy and the refutation of that elephant analogy. I'm not going to go through that here. But this is kind of the idea that all religions are climbing the same mountain, reaching the same God. So, is this possible? I feel like this question is asked from three different perspectives. The first is that all religions are equal in their pursuit. The second is all religions are partially equal. And the third is all religions are equally false or equally wrong. So the first one, are all religions equal? Very clearly not. Religions make mutually exclusive claims. In fact, some religions began in opposition to other religions. For example, Islam started in opposition to Christianity because the Prophet Muhammad believed that Christians were completely wrong in their belief of the Trinity. And so Christianity and Islam can't be true in the same world. They can't both be true in the same world because the Islam community believes that every single Christian, for believing in the Trinity, has committed the unforgivable sin of shirk. And for that, we're going to burn in hell. That's what they believe. If you look in the notes, I think there is a reason to believe that, a reason to explain why why the belief in the Trinity isn't wrong. So, what about culturally relative beliefs? People say that if you're born over here, if you're born in Pakistan, you're Muslim, and if you're born in India, you're Hindu, and if you're born in Brazil, you're Christian. So that must be true. They all believe the same thing. They all believe in the same thing. It's just different cultures. But that makes no sense because that's saying that your belief is wrong or right based on where you're from or how you came to believe in it. And that clearly has nothing to do with truth or, lies. So all religions cannot be true. Hindus, for example, believe that when you die, you get reincarnated. Christians believe that when you die, you go back to meet with your Creator. How can they both be true in the same world? Clearly, they cannot all be equally true. What about all being partially true? Well, in a sense, that can be correct because religions all try to explain the nature of the universe, like we were saying, the nature of God. They all seem to lay out a similar set of moral standards that we need to follow that kind of match with the Ten Commandments. However, Christianity is the only religion that says no matter how long or how much effort or how great of a person you are and how much you adhere to your moral standards, that's not good enough. You're never going to reach God. It's the only religion that says God is the only one who's good enough to come down and save you and do what only the perfect can do, right? And so they are partially false. I mean, they're partially similar, but like the late apologist Ravi Zacharias said, it's not that all religions are fundamentally the same and superficially different. They are fundamentally different and at best superficially similar. And finally, are all religions equally false? This is the only possible one in this list that we've got here. This is the only one that could be philosophically correct. However, this would require God to not exist. And there are plenty of proofs for God's existence. I'm not going to go through them today, but again, you can check in the notes where I've put out one argument called the Kalam argument for the existence of God. So, what is the emotion behind this question? Why would someone be saying that aren't all religions the same, different approaches to the same God? Insecurity. Very cool. I can see that. Anyone else? Acceptance. We want you all to realize you're on the same page, right? Yeah? A lack of understanding. Okay. So if you have someone at your workplace, someone in your family who says, you know what, all religions are the same, what could they be thinking? It could be a desire to just see everyone go to heaven. A universalist desire, right? You're all going to heaven. I don't want to think anything else. So you're all believing this. We're all believing the same thing. We're all on the same page. It could be that. Can anyone think of a compassionate response? I wrote down maybe a compassionate response is to respond with a testimony of God's effective, undeserved love in your own life for someone who is struggling through this. Our testimonies are great compassionate responses. Very difficult to argue with a testimony. All right, last one. If God is all loving and all powerful, wouldn't he have everyone hear the good news and be saved? So in this, there seems to be two premises. There seems to be two underlying thoughts. The first is, if God is all powerful, then he can create a world in which everybody hears the gospel and is freely saved. And if he is all loving, he prefers such a world. Right? So if God is all loving, he can create a world in which everyone hears the gospel and is freely saved. If he's all loving, he would prefer this world. Let's see if those two things are correct. If you look in the notes, I wrote down some reasons to see that God does want everyone to be saved. But I just want to point out, so there's a Marvel character. His name is Kilgrave. He's a bad guy. And it's in the series on Netflix right now called Jessica Jones. And his power is if he says something, you have to do it. So if he were to say to everyone, do a handstand, everyone in the room would do a handstand right now. If he were to say to you, cut off your foot, you would cut off your foot. You have to obey what he says. And in the story, he tries to get a woman to fall in love with him. So he isn't allowed to tell her what to do. Otherwise, she won't truly love him. It's a fascinating kind of outworking on free will. And he knows that if you were to tell her to be his girlfriend, she would feel enslaved and violated. There would be no real love in that. So, God can clearly create a world in which everyone hears the gospel, but it's out of his control for everyone to freely accept that gospel, right? Unless he were to override free will. So I don't believe the first premise is right. What about the second premise, that God would prefer such a world? Okay, well, let's, for example, say that God can create a world. He creates a world in which everyone has heard the gospel and is freely saved. Why should he prefer that world? Maybe that world has some things in it that are less desirable. For example, maybe that world only has 3 people in it. Maybe as soon as a 4th person is in that world, one of them is going to reject the gospel. So why should God prefer that world? Maybe his love is just so overwhelming that he desires more saints. He desires to share his love with more people. He desires more people to come to salvation, even at the cost of some people being lost. Maybe in God's infinite knowledge, he knows how to reach the optimal balance of those being saved, a multitude of saints with a multitude of sinners. And maybe this world is that world. As long as God offers universal salvation, we can say he is a loving God, even if there are people in the world that are being lost. So does God offer universal salvation? Well, we know that Jesus Christ is a free gift made available to everyone who comes to accept it. But what about people who have never heard the gospel? For example, what about in North America, before the missionaries arrived, we go back in time and there is a Native American, and we're going to call him Walking Bear. And Walking Bear, he goes out in the night sky and he sees the beautiful stars and he sees the great sunsets, and he gets the sense that there is the Great Spirit who has created everything. And we are to worship the Great Spirit. And he feels this connection with those around him, this love for the brotherhood of man. And he knows that he must serve the good of those around him. As soon as Walking Bear decides to worship anything else, decides to create this totem pole that is going to represent God or be God, he is choosing to ignore the Great Spirit and start to worship the Creator. Or as soon as he starts acting selfishly for his own pursuit and not the pursuit of the good of man, he is sinning and rejecting his general revelation that God has given him. And so the Bible teaches there is a universality of sinfulness in the world, requiring the universality of grace. Man keeps on turning away from God. It reminds me of when Abraham came back and said, even if someone were to rise from the dead, they wouldn't turn from their sins and be saved, no matter the method of the message. But maybe, and I'm not saying that this one is true, but maybe God in his infinite wisdom was able to know who in the world would hear the gospel and choose to respond to it positively, and so made sure that they were born in a time and a place in which they would be exposed to the gospel. If that is possible, then God can be seen as a loving God. Acts 17 verse 24, there's the totem pole. Acts 17 verse 24 says, the God who made the world, okay, it says a bunch, but then if we go to verse 26, it says, from one man he made all the nations that they should inhabit the whole earth, and he marked out their appointed times in history and the boundaries of their lands. It seems like God does have some role to play in when and where people are in history. And it might just be that God is trying to get everyone who would respond positively to the gospel to be exposed to it in history. So, what kind of emotion would lead someone to say, if God is all loving and all powerful, wouldn't he have everyone hear the good news? Yeah.
Maybe they have never understood true love because the world distorts it so much.
Sure, maybe they've never experienced true love. That's interesting. Anyone else? I believe this would be someone who is misunderstanding God's character. They have a misunderstanding of who God is, believing that he's choosing to send people to hell just because, I don't know, he's having fun with that. And a great compassionate response. Does anyone have any ideas? Next week, Paul's going to be talking a little bit about God's desire to see everyone to be saved, and he'll point out some verses that you can find in my notes as well. But I think a great compassionate response is to explain how God has a desire to see everyone saved. He wants, even in the Old Testament, he begs Israel to turn away from their wicked ways because he does not rejoice in the death of the wicked. So in conclusion, as I end off, I want to point out that in answer to this question, okay, is it intolerant and unloving to claim that Christianity is the only way to God? I don't believe it is. Today, I believe that we have been able to give a defense to show that it is not an unloving stance. I feel like the Christian is completely justified to say that only Christianity is the way to salvation and the Father, and that they have every reason to believe that they are not being arrogant and immoral and intolerant, but sincere in their beliefs. Not only that, but if we can focus on this verse from John 14, verse 6, that says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. And know that if we are to love those around us and enter into these courageous conversations with those around us, our desire, if the worship team can come up, our desire to love them to the full extent of love would be to see them come into a saving knowledge of Jesus and a saving knowledge of his grace. So as you mull through this question, as you meditate on it, as you make it a part of your repertoire and coming into a conversation with others, again, this isn't for you to go to your non-believing Christian friends, your non-believing friends and say, I am a Christian and I'm totally justified. Bring on all your doubts. It's to go to them without fear in today's modern world and to tell them about the love of Jesus, because his love is so incredibly powerful and so incredibly overwhelming. And you yourselves have all been exposed to the gospel message that Jesus sent his son to die on a cross for you. And you have been offered a free gift of grace. The question is, how do you respond to it? Do you respond to it with criticism? Do you respond to it with doubt? Or are you willing to respond to it with full acceptance, laying your life down? This grace that God's given us is unequaled, unrivaled. There is no other like it in the whole world. So let's just close our eyes